Welcome, everyone, to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success, our weekly podcast for software sales professionals who want to sell better. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, make Software Sales Simplified your home for insights, trends, and news from the world of enterprise software sales. I'm Matt Long, and I'm joined by my illustrious colleague, Kevin Donville. Together, we have over 50 years of enterprise software selling experience and implementation as well. We're happy that you've joined us today as we talk to industry experts, share opinions, and learn from each other. Before we get started, though, we'd like to remind you to like and subscribe to stay abreast of our latest episodes. We really appreciate it. Today, we're talking with an old friend and colleague of ours, Kimberly Arnold. Kimberly runs an organization called Somatic Leadership, but she has a long career in enterprise sales and delivery with stints both at Price Waterhouse as well as Salesforce, Blue Shield, to name others. So we're really happy to have you on, Kimberly. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. You didn't name the infamous Introspect software where we all met. Come on.
I was saving the best for last, but yes, our infamous Introspect, which was, I got to say, one of the most exciting and fun times of my life, and some of the friendships we forged during that. That was in the height of the .com boom, when we were all going to be millionaires in a matter of a year or so. Fortunately, didn't quite work out the way we had planned, but did lead to some very lasting friendships, as well as experiences that will take forever. So that's a given there. Anyway, why don't we go ahead and just introduce yourself, Kim? Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what you're doing now, and then we'll get into kind of your interesting journey to get here.
Yeah, thank you. So, Kimberly, this was a big step when I turned 51. Actually, I took on Kimberly. People knew me as Kim prior to that, so I'll say Kimberly. And what I'm doing now is I'm teaching teams how to turn stress into strength. And they learn 60-second or less resets that they can use to really build resilience into the workday. And the approach is learning how to interrupt your automatic stress response and replace it with a way to be calm, confident, connected, and collaborative with others, even in the heat of the moment.
This is such a fascinating thing for me because, when I first got into enterprise sales, 25, 26, whatever it was, years ago, and it was the .com as well. And so the work ethic was like 80-hour weeks. Everyone like grinding it out, right? Because the payoff was this big carrot that we had, right? Everyone was going to go public. Everyone's going to get rich. And so you're working there. I didn't have a family at the time, but high intensity, lots of drinking, some other things going on. Drinking wasn't a requirement, but it almost seemed like it was in the peninsula and Silicon Valley and all that kind of stuff in terms of that culture. But never really thought about what's the long-term effects of this, not just physically from everything, but just emotionally and mentally, right? Because I think it did take a toll, and it's something that we don't really talk about as sales professionals. I think the mantra is just suck it up. You're just grinding it out. We got this. It's very alpha oriented, and you don't talk about your shortcomings or feelings or fears or things like that. Though I will say a lot of my conversations with my AEs was me being therapist to them for all the neuroses that they're going through. Right. But, in that sales culture, especially male dominated, especially at that time, talking about feelings or failings or fears was not part of that. So I find it really interesting to find out, you joined us at Introspect as a very accomplished person at PwC. In fact, I think you were up for partnership that you chose not to go in. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you got started in your career and maybe that first stint at PwC and what you learned there and what kind of led you to move on.
Yeah, no, it was an incredible time. I had just graduated from Northwestern and I got networking through an alum to get this, coveted consulting job at Price Waterhouse. And my first year was tough because I lost my mom to leukemia. Mm. And I was the only one living at home with her at the time. And that was its own big wake-up call of you get one life and you better live it full out.
Yeah.
But I had a spectacular group around me. I had amazing sponsorship, mentorship. I was given opportunities way before I thought I was ready for them. I even got a scholarship for a full ride to the University of Chicago for business school, which was pretty incredible. And I came out and I was working with a spectacular partner at that time. His name was David Schneider. And any of us who worked under Schneider, it was just like one of those times where he saw you, he believed in you, and he did that with like 1,000 people. I mean, it was just incredible how engaged everybody was. And I'll date myself, you'll appreciate this. I was working at Intel on the launch of the Pentium 3. And
Wow.
they had decided that they were going to add a service to that chip, trying to add a service to increase the value of the product, right? And PwC was in there helping make that happen. And this was in the time that Andy Grove would run a parallel team. If you remember, he would often run this stealth team internally to figure out the best solution. And sure enough, a few months before our go live, he took it off of our technology onto theirs. And I was co-leading the program office of a team of about 200 people. We had to redirect them all. And I remember I went up to Hillsborough for 4 days and I came back 28 days later. Yes, I did have to go buy some clothes. And that situation was the one that finally had them say, yes, you've done all the things, we can vote you in now. And I thought to myself, I have everything going for me here. But the thing I don't have going for me here is work-life balance and taking care of my health. And really because of what I'd seen happen to my mom, it shocked the heck out of everybody. I'd gotten the golden ticket and I said, thank you very much. I'm going to go do something else.
Wow. That's a huge realization to come to, especially for something like that, where getting partnership, it's like in a law firm, like getting to that point is really the goal. That's what everyone's focused on. And to actually have that handed to you and to turn it down for very valid reasons. It's interesting though, because when you're saying I left for, 3 days and I came back 28 days later or whatever, that doesn't surprise me at all. That was almost the expectation that you
Right.
did everything for work and for the success of the company, right? And we're all kind of bought into that for a while. I think that definitely changed over time as we started realizing with the layoffs and just the failed companies and everything. Like, look, there's no guarantee of anything, and you do have to look out for yourself. I'm curious. So after you made that decision, what led you to Introspect? Because Introspect was the complete opposite of PwC, right? A
Well,
young
right.
startup, right?
You know,
Houston together, but tell me about that.
yeah, you may remember David Ito,
Yeah.
and I was friends with his wife, Sonal,
Mhm.
and I don't know, he and I had a conversation and I was like, you know what? I knew that I really wanted to go work on a product. That was the other thing. I'd spent my whole career in service. And I said, I really want to go have the experience of working on a product. I was super excited about what we were going to do with, whatever we called it, collaborative knowledge management. I mean, we really were the precursor to Facebook, to Chatter at Salesforce. I mean, when you think about the technology we were driving, and of course, our lovely colleague, Tom Gruber, was the
Mhm.
one who did get the wild success with Siri. But nonetheless, we were really onto something. And I was really excited about the possibility of driving that collaboration. And I will say, one of the things that I do recall, because we were all together when 9/11 happened, and I
Mhm.
do specifically remember that day. And I remember the power of the technology that we could go into our internal view of Introspect and we could immediately find out that everybody was okay. We hadn't lost anybody. Jim, the CEO, could immediately communicate and say, please go home, be with your families, take care of what you need to. When I think about the power of how we could collaborate and get clarity quickly, it was potent.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it back, because Tom was like one of the forefronts of just, knowledge management and what that
Right.
meant. And that
Yeah.
product was just so incredible that you just put all these inputs in, to get things out. There was not AI on it, but it felt very
Yeah.
AI-ish, right?
That's
Because
right.
the collective knowledge of everyone who was working on projects or sales campaigns, whatever, was in that system, and you could ask it questions, it would spit out answers,
Yeah.
right? And that, of course, led, Tom Gruber to found Siri, which we should know
Right.
well was sold to Apple and is part of our lives today.
That's right.
Brilliant man, by the way. I mean, I'd get in conversations with him. I'd swear like about 30 seconds in, I'd be like, I have no idea what he's saying.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to keep up and say something kind of intelligent at this point. But
Yeah.
it was certainly a fun time, but a very stressful, driven time as well. As I
I know,
mentioned,
given that I thought I was leaving to have work-life balance,
yeah,
and then I was at Introspect, I was like, But after that, I made the choice that was the work-life balance, because then I went to Blue Shield of California. And it was specifically Blue Shield of California, because that meant I traveled in California. I wasn't getting on a plane. I wasn't flying across the country. I wasn't doing, I had done all that for a long time in consulting. And when I really sat with, if I want to take, I had my whole career leading large scale change. And I said, if there was one industry I want to redesign and help, it's healthcare. And that was coming from everything I had gone through with my mother and her journey with leukemia. Yeah.
so what are some of the things that you learn? I guess very quickly, what are some of the things that you learned at PwC beyond the fact that you need to work-life balance? But were there actually organizational things and learnings that you've carried on to these very different types of companies with very different focuses, even Introspect and then to Blue Shield, which I think Blue Shield is technically a nonprofit, right? But obviously in a space that's very important to a lot of people with complexities and billing and all these types of things. But what did you carry from those different things that you're able to implement?
The theme that's been true for me my whole career is I've been passionate about driving large scale change and really understanding the dynamics of what does it take to take a big group of people and have them adopt a new behavior. So even back to the project at Intel, I was the one weaving together the people, process, and technology components to make sure that when the new technology came, the people were going to do the things you wanted them to do with it, right? And we all know that, 80% or whatever of those implementations fail because you don't get the people to make the behavior change. So when I was at Blue Shield, I was actually a part of a team that built out what we called the change lab. And we would take teams that were going through big change and we would take them through a 2.5-day workshop to help them set the vision, determine the stakeholders they had to engage, how they were going to do it, and really face, this is actually important for the work I do now, really face the reality of where am I in the course of this change? Am I ready to accept it? Am I resisting it? Do I view it as positive? Do I view it as negative? Because honestly, all of those components are showing up all the time in my body. And as soon as I have awareness of that, that can make a difference. But back in the day, we were only, frankly, mostly dealing with the mind.
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned, but the change management component is true for anything, really. I mean, when it comes down to it, anything that involves people, which everything does, what you're really tasked with is helping them with this transition, moving from a current state to a different state, right? And as a seller, I think that's something that dawned on me more. In the beginning of my career, it was all about winning the deal, everything to win the deal, get the deal in, get the contract signed, and then move on. But then further in my career, I realized the really important thing was ensuring to the executive who's ever sponsoring this that you are successfully going to take their organization and move it to this new area, right? That is going to benefit from the solution you're providing and they're going to actually achieve those benefits. And that is no small task. And that involves people from the delivery side, but it starts with the sales side, and support, all the different components coming together.
I want to dip under that one for a minute, because when you think now about communication that's happening, there are 3 main components of communication. There's the words that I say, there is the physical positioning of my body when I say it, and there's the tone of voice that I use. Now, some people may question this research, but if you were to say which of those 3 things is speaking the loudest when someone is talking to you? So my physical body position or facial expression, my tone of voice, and the words, which is speaking the loudest to you?
I would say the physical component, right? But that it goes unnoticed because you're so focused on your words and keeping a poker face, but you don't really notice that your chest or your stomach is like all tensed up or like, all those things. That for me, I think that's it.
Yeah. The research absolutely says the facial expression, body position is speaking the loudest. Tone of voice is next, which leaves a whopping 7% for the words that you say.
There's
And
been
when
a
you
couple
think,
of comedians that have picked up on that before and incorporated that into some pretty startling observations inside of their platform. One of them being Eddie Izzard, who does this wonderful routine about the speech that Kennedy gave in Germany about where he turns to the audience and goes, Ich bin ein Berliner. Of course, what he actually said was, I am a donut. But the audience just goes bananas because they know what he was trying to say.
right,
It's been held up as this iconic example of motivational speaking and whipping up support out of the crowd. What he actually said was actually pretty foolish. But to your point, it was how he said it, his positioning, his confidence, his collection of himself as he said it. That's what communicated with people rather than the actual words in the delivery.
right. And that's a part of why I say that, because now if we're talking to sellers, the reality of how I'm actually managing my body and the responses in my body. So to your point, if I showed up to sell to you and I was like this, how would that go over?
Not terribly well,
I
no.
could say all the perfect words. This is not going to go well, right? Or I could show up like this. How does that feel? Right? So I didn't get up from my chair. I didn't move very much, right? But what I can promise you, I mean, it's referred to as your mirror neurons, but what's true is they're always tracking. Your mirror neurons are always tracking, kind of like they're trying to gauge sort of the emotional content of what's going on in front of you. And so to your point, Matt, about, you're just talking to someone and you're trying to figure out the thing to say and at that moment, the body starts to tense up and the rest of it. As soon as your body starts to tense up, it's now cueing your brain that you're not safe. And now you're not going to have access to your strategic thinking anyway. So this is really, this is the nature of what there is to start to unpack and be aware of, particularly in a selling situation, because all of those dynamics are at play.
One more question I have, I want to start drilling down into this because this is the thing that I think is really interesting about where you are currently. But after Blue Shield, then you went to Salesforce,
I did
which
indeed.
I would think is not the opposite, but Salesforce is known for a very driven culture, right?
Yeah. So again,
Uh,
so much for that work-life balance game. But
I was going to say, what were you thinking? No, I
well,
love Salesforce,
here's,
but they are known to drive you pretty hard. Right?
yeah, what I had also a phenomenal time at Blue Shield. I'll say
Yeah.
I worked with fabulous people. It was great to share that mission of healthcare and the rest of it. And when I was there, we automated the quote to card process on the Salesforce platform. And it happened at a time that Blue Shield was replacing its back-end core system. And so all of the attention of the organization was going towards that. Rightfully so in many respects. But I knew what we had just done. We did it on the Salesforce platform about 5 years ahead of the industry. And being somebody who was driving change throughout her whole career, and I was like, ooh, I could go, and really what I was standing for at Salesforce was transforming the member experience. I worked with over 70 health plans across the globe to create their vision to create a better experience for members. And after, again, what my mother had been through with her leukemia journey, I felt really passionate about doing that. That part I don't regret. And I don't regret any of it, but there was a big lesson in there for me because I did have at Salesforce, I had the perfect storm moment. I had a shift. Frankly had a new leader every year. It was kind of a wild ride, but at one point I had a particularly challenging relationship with my direct manager. And that happened at the same time that I was grieving the death of my uncle, who was my close relative here locally, who I'd moved here to be near, decades before. I was caregiving my father and his partner in another state. I was going through menopause. I mean, if you wanted to line up all the high stress moments together at one time, I got them.
Yeah.
And that sent me into a stress-induced 15-week medical leave. And the reality was I literally had 15 symptoms at that time. And I knew it was severe enough. It actually took a colleague saying to me, you need to take a medical leave, because I had been so good at surviving so much for so long. Honestly, until she said that, I wasn't even thinking that. I was still in okay, what can I do to get this back under control? I was going to the acupuncturist and the osteopath, all these people. And she's like, you got to take a leave. And I was like, you're right. And so I took that leave. I did go through a creative alternative healing journey, which is a topic for another day. But what I will say is during that time, I just kept hearing the words of my teacher, Wendy Palmer, who's an Aikido sensei, saying, under pressure, you don't rise to your expectations, you fall to your habits. And I had to own that I stopped doing, even though, I mean, for 15 years, everybody knew every vacation I took, I was off, at a conscious dance workshop or a retreat, or I was doing Tai Chi or Qigong or Feldenkrais or you name it. I did a 9-month training with Wendy on how to take Aikido off the mat and work with leaders and teams. I got certified in all these practices. But what I realized was when I was in the super high stress environment, it's like the salmon going up the stream. It's really hard to be the one, even if I know how to make a shift, my mirror neurons are pinging off of all the stressed people around me. And it was too much.
I can understand that. I mean, people talk about how when you're in that environment, it's hard for you to reflect upon what's happening to yourself because your state of agitation is the norm.
That's right. You're speaking to a really important point, Kevin, because our systems feel a little bit safer to stay with what's familiar. And if what's familiar is being in hustle and running and doing the next thing and doing the next thing and checking this thing every 30 seconds, like if that's what's happening, it's easy to become that. And the reality is you become what you practice.
Remember when we were working together, you always were cognizant of other people's state. You were very, careful to make sure that people like me were taking care of ourselves. And you were often very observant about the state that we were in and provided a lot of good guidance and cautionary advice relative to where we are. So it's not surprising to me that eventually you came to this realization that needed to be part of your own journey, which you just described so eloquently there, which I was not aware of all those different steps. And we need to have a conversation because I studied Aikido for a number of years as well. So I'd love to have a conversation offline with you about that. But then you kind of went, okay, this works for me. And you can see the benefit to yourself. But then you made this leap about taking it to the next step forward with somatic leadership. Walk me through the thought process, because I can only imagine that there must have been a little bit of anxiety relative to that decision. What got you to that point to make that leap?
Salesforce made it easy. They showed me the door in August of 2020.
There you go.
Wow.
They made that easy.
The middle of the pandemic, no less. Yeah.
Middle of the pandemic. And I did some consulting with some other friends for a few years, which I was super grateful for. But it really felt like the universe was knocking on my, sort of like tapping on your shoulder going, it's time. You've been thinking about this forever. It started with, I'm active on LinkedIn. That's my jam, the place that I hang out. And in July of 2023, I started a weekly series called Micro Shift Monday. And what inspired that was because I also had just read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. I don't know if you know that book or not, but the idea of like, you can make a tiny change that has a remarkable result. And I looked to my own situation at Salesforce, everywhere I'd been, everybody I talked to. Oh, I didn't work out today. Oh, I didn't have time to stretch. Oh, I forgot to meditate this morning. All the things that they didn't do. And what I knew from the work with Wendy Palmer, the Aikido sensei, was you can make a slight shift in your attention and your body position, and you will shift your hormones, which will shift your nervous system. It'll shift what you think, what you feel, what you say, how you respond. And you can do it in an instant. And I knew that. And so what I did was I started breaking down, sort of curating all these practices that I learned, and I started curating them down into little shifts that you could make in less than a minute, because I knew that was both A, the attention span, and B, the amount of time that people had. Now, what I didn't know, but I learned when I dove into it further, was that, and we can break this down, but there literally is a moment where you can shift your stress cycle and you can prevent the cortisol from coming.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want to do that? And we can unpack more of that.
I love that. I think, being able to take these moments and pause is really important. And I'll tell you a little story. I visited Russia with an old girlfriend. This is years ago. She was from remote Siberia, though, right? Not Moscow and that area.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating trip. One of the biggest things I took away was her family. Every time before they would leave the house, they would stop and sit in the foyer. There's no benches there and just in silence for 2 minutes. And then they get up and go out, right? And you think about it in our lives with the kids and everything, it's just like, grab your stuff, we're going to go, blah, blah, out the door, blah, blah, all these things, right? Same thing. It's like, what? Okay. So doing that, it made like this transition, like this very conscious, effort to like, okay, let's pause and think about what we're doing. And I've actually incorporated that in our family, right? Where, we don't pray before we eat, but before we have a meal, and we have a dinner every night, right? That I cook, we pause and take a breath, right? Because same thing, people are coming in from all different areas, all this different energy and things going on in your head. And it's like, before we start eating just voraciously and not even thinking about what we're doing, let's just pause, take one big breath, let it out. And then, Kevin, you'll appreciate it. We say itadakimasu, right? So, let's start eating. It just makes a huge difference. And so being able to, one, identify that, and then being able to start incorporating that into a business context, I think is just incredible. And I want to hear more about how, I guess, as you're kind of learning how to do these little micro practices and things, how did that eventually evolve into what you're starting to deliver now?
Yeah, no, thank you. Let's take a step back and let's start by unpacking what happens when we get hit with stress. So you could take a moment, something that didn't go the way you wanted. Somebody made a comment. I think we're gonna dive into. I asked you guys to come with your toughest sales moment, so we'll dive into that. Before we go there, just recognize, so you can even think back to that moment. What happens is there's something that's the trigger, right? And it could be the comment, the action, whatever it is, there's a trigger. And as soon as the trigger happens, your body's going to give you a shot of adrenaline. And what the adrenaline does is it says, take the blood from the brain, put it into the large muscles, the arms and legs, prepare this body to fight, freeze, appease, like prepare it to react now. It's creating a sense of urgency. And the amount of adrenaline that you get and how quickly it comes is dependent upon how big the threat appears to you, right? Did somebody make a comment that's a little, or like, there's really somebody coming for you. So you get the shot of adrenaline, but then there's a gap, and the research goes anywhere from 3 to 20 minutes. There's a gap before the cortisol comes. The cortisol comes to help sustain your strength for the response, for the reactivity, for what you're trying to do, right? So if what I want to do is sustain the cortisol because I'm, in some high intense athletic game, cool, I should have it because I need it and I need to keep. But like in the working world, that cortisol shows up because somebody made a comment, and then it collectively over time, if you don't do something to dissipate both the adrenaline and the cortisol, it gets stuck in your body. And the cortisol itself is really the number one driver of inflammation that's driving chronic disease, everything from cardiovascular disease, diabetes, neurodegenerative conditions like ALS, Alzheimer's, rheumatoid arthritis. Like there's a never-ending list of what the cortisol, excess cortisol is driving inflammation, driving chronic disease. And when you look at that from a business perspective, so when you say, well, what's the cost to the business of stress? Because I think particularly it's really tricky in sales, because I think often in sales, they kind of want you to be under pressure and they want you to have the, and they're really, if you look at the research around stress, there really is what's called your eustress, which is the positive stress. But then when it goes too far, you end up in distress, which is the negative stress. And I think often I would watch people say, you need to have the stress, but I'd watch it go, kind of past the middle, right? And, you can say the cost to the business, pretty clear. High stress, more sick days, look at me, leave of absence, attrition. I was definitely regrettable attrition when I left PwC. And now people are managing chronic disease. So, I look back to my consulting days. I just took a walk with a dear friend from 30 years ago who is having open heart surgery in September. And it really hit me because he said, I needed you 20 years ago. And I was like, yep. And I want to reach all those people in their career to help them because they don't have to carry the stress that we've carried.
Yeah. I mean, I think about times, stressful times, we asked about when you had a bad experience from a demo or presentation. I really discovered this very, very poignantly when I actually was having some nerve issues personally, brought on by both environmental and other things. So I had a neuropathy where, my fingers were numb, my legs and things were numb, hard to think. I found out it was a combination of heavy metal poisoning as well as a B12 deficiency, but it was my spinal column, the sheathing was unraveling, right? It was like, but when I would get hit, I'd be in a demo, trying to do something, and I get hit with a question, and that instant, fear or stress or whatever about that question, normally I could be able to manage, right? I mean, maybe you tighten up a little bit, right? Or something. But in this state, it actually paralyzed me. I mean, physically paralyzed me. And I just remember just freezing up. And it was such a departure from what I was able to. I was always able to come power through and do this and come up with the right answer and all these types of things. And the fact that I couldn't do that, I think it just really illuminated just how big of an issue this was, but also the effects that it was having on me. So for me, that it wasn't a wake-up experience, but it made it very evident to me that these pressures and things, I have to learn how to deal with them another way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I don't know which one of you is going to be our volunteer today with a specific scenario. Okay, Mr. Kevin, you're going to do it. No, you guys. Okay.
Yeah, I have two. So if you don't like the first one, I can switch over to something else.
No, I want you to pick the one that has the most juice for you, because that's what we're going to work with.
The most stressed I've ever been in my professional career.
Okay.
Okay.
So before you do that, just take a moment, because we don't need to totally get you super amped. Don't go crazy on me. Just take a moment, feel your feet. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you can tell me.
It's funny. It's true. I was starting to relive that state of anxiety just to try.
No, I could feel it. That's why I was like, let's give you a moment. Okay.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So trying to keep the name, those parties shall be remain nameless to protect the
That's right.
We had just been acquired. I had been named the global lead of a team and was having my first one-on-one with the CRO, global CRO. I reported directly to this person and walked into the meeting. I had my presentation ready to give and talk about my plan for the team. And the meeting started out with, I need you to fire all your people. I thought he was kidding. And I ended up having to squelch the moment of absolute panic and rage that both welled up in me at the same time.
Yeah, I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause you for a moment and say, when you said that, I will tell you, I literally felt like a contraction like this in the middle of my chest.
Yeah.
As soon as you said, I have to fire all my people, my body went. So we don't need to go further into the story necessarily, unless there's some other part of that you want to share at this moment.
No. I mean, that you can imagine.
That's enough.
That was not a fun day. So yeah.
Right. Okay. So I was sharing to you what I noticed in my body, but I'm curious for you, even as you reflect back on that thing and you said I could start to feel it. So I'm going to walk through a list of different things and you can just notice for yourself and then you can tell me what was true. What's true, I will say what's true for everybody when you have that trigger of stress is some muscles get tight somewhere. It could be in your jaw. It could be a knot in your stomach, in your throat, in your chest, shoulders, anywhere. So do you have some place where something gets tight and what do you notice gets tight?
Upper back.
Upper back. So like between your shoulder blades,
up
into your neck.
Everything from right below the shoulders all the way.
Your whole traps, they all just.
The traps just lock up.
Okay, so the traps lock up. Great. Then the next thing is, do you notice any change in temperature? So I know okay, what do you notice that changes in temperature? You get hot. And where do you notice heat?
A couple of different places, my palms, my cheeks.
Okay.
And also that same area that's getting tight.
It gets hot.
Starts to get hot.
So you get like a big heat wave.
Yeah.
And what happens to your breathing?
Well, I'm very careful to regulate it.
Okay.
Because I know my instinct is for me to start taking bigger, deeper breaths.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, that's unusual.
Yeah. Well, it's the fight or flight response kicking in, I think.
But what I'm going to say is if you start taking bigger, deeper breaths, that's actually a helpful practice that your body has, because most people don't do that.
Yeah.
Most people in that moment actually will stop breathing.
Yeah, hold their breath. And
So
I think
hold
when I was younger, I probably would have. Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying, so good for you. You're actually demonstrating the power of the muscle memory because your body knows to start taking deep breaths when that happens. Beautiful. So change in your breathing. How about perspiration?
Yeah. The pits go.
The pits go for sure.
And my hands sweat.
And your hands sweat. Right. Yeah, that's right. Great. And how about your heart rate?
It can start to go up, but I kind of built in this in stressful moments to slow down.
That's right. So because actually a deep breath and a long exhale will actually lower the heart rate.
Yeah.
So you've got some built-in compensation, which is fabulous. The reason why you want to know all of these things is because the reality is that your brain registers that body sensation before the thought and emotion. When your body is doing all the things to prepare you to get the adrenaline and cortisol pumping, preparing you for something, your brain is immediately like, we are not safe here. We are not safe here. And where it goes is it goes to, all I can see is the stress. I now have tunnel vision. And because I'm not safe, this is now me against you. It's us against them. It's black versus white. We go into this absolute negative thinking, right? Let's take a breath. And from that place, really all you see is the stress and the reactivity. Now, we've already been demonstrating this. So the first truth is brain registers body sensation before thought and emotion. The second truth is if I shift my body, I will shift the cue to my brain and I can actually reclaim my calm, my confidence, my connection, collaboration in an instant. So back to the trigger adrenaline gap before the cortisol, the way that I work with people in making this shift is the moment you start to notice, oh, that heat is going on between my traps, you would pause. I describe it as pacing yourself. You would pause. You would go, oh, I feel the heat in my traps. That's my A. I'm going to acknowledge what's happening. My C is then I'm going to center, and we're going to talk about a different acronym for centering. And after I do that is when I would engage. Now, people would go, I don't have time to do that. I go, you don't have time to go like this? Because you do. And it gets that fast when you practice it. Like you've already got the muscle memory to slow down your breathing, right? You tracking with me?
Totally.
Pace yourself? Great. So where we're going to go in the centering is we're going to use another acronym, which I really love to use working with sellers because there's a lot of back and forth going on in the sales process. And I describe this to engage with guts. We're going to walk through guts. Take a moment. G stands for ground. So anybody listening, if you've got your legs crossed or you don't have your feet on the floor, I'm going to invite you right now to put both feet flat on the floor below you. Take a moment and literally press your weight into each heel so you feel that support coming from below. And then, yes, this may sound a little woo, but it really does help. Imagine you have roots growing out of your heels. And those roots are going as deep into the ground as you are tall. And then just notice what happens in your body when you feel that ground, that support. Gravity is actually always telling us you belong right here, right now. What do you notice just from grounding?
Feel more stable.
Aside from when there's an earthquake, the ground is usually a pretty stable place to hang out.
I am in California.
So am I. Yes. Therefore, we start with ground. Now, the U is what I refer to as an uphail. And imagine as you inhale that you have breath coming almost like from your tailbone up your spine, almost like a fountain out of the top of your head on your inhale. We call that an uphail. So I'm taking an inhale, it's coming up my back, up the top of my head. And on the exhale, I'm relaxing down the front. So I'm relaxing my jaw, shoulders, chest, and belly. G ground, U uphail. What do you notice from your uphail?
That everything sort of becomes a more homogeneous level of readiness and tension. So the tension goes away where it's building up and it's more stable and supportive in places that maybe were a little not.
Great. Beautiful. So ground, uphail. Now the T part is a little bit more intention than it is body-based, but play this game with me for a minute. Even when you walked into that room with that leader, if you could have filled the space around you with a shared quality, that you both would have wanted out of that interaction? What might have been a shared quality that you could have brought?
Can you elaborate? I'm not sure what you
Sure.
mean.
So what I mean by that is, so for example, if I were in a selling situation, I might say, wow, I want to show up with clarity. I want to show up with understanding. Maybe I want to show up with compassion for what's happening for them. Maybe I want to show up with some openness and curiosity. So any quality that you might say, oh, this is the quality that I really, and literally the way I think about this is if we were standing in a room, we would be doing this in a way that, like, if I could put my arms around and we were both standing in the circle together. You've done Aikido, so you get what I mean by that.
Mhm.
So what would be the quality that you would want to bring to that?
Trust.
And pardon?
Trust.
Trust, yes. And trust would create a sense of togetherness. So I'm going to ground, I'm going to uphail, I'm going to imagine that I'm filling the space around me, including the other person, with trust. Now, the S stands for space. And let's talk about this one. This one's a little bit different, but wow, in the selling, this is so critical because I can imagine the moment, actually, you tell me, the moment that this leader said, you got to fire your whole team, what impact did that have on you?
Well, to say that the stress level went through the roof, and I also knew it was a very bad and potentially damaging decision for the company.
Yep.
And it was going to harm these people that I cared about. So
That's right.
a lot of negative.
A lot of appropriate negative, a lot of appropriate negative. And was there anything that you made it mean about you personally?
No.
Okay. So in that case, because you were coming in as a leader and it was really about your team, I can imagine that wouldn't be true. But how often have you been in a selling situation where somebody made some negative comment that was hard to not take personally?
Yeah, that has definitely happened. In the non-leadership when I was an IC or when I was a player coach, those have shown up. And then there's a personal pride and an element that you feel.
Totally. Like I want to show up as my best self. And
Right.
that's not, right. The S stands for space. And the point is when somebody makes the comment, you want to actually see it landing in the space in front of you. You might imagine that it's landing in a basket. If there was a table in front of you, it lands on the table. And when you see it landing in the space in front of you, what I like to do is immediately ground, uplift, remember, oh, I'm here, creating a sense of trust. And then I look to what was said. And then I can have the perspective to say, was there some merit here? Even if it's constructive feedback, there could be merit in what was spoken. Or I could say, wow, this comment wasn't even meant for me. And I'm just going to say thank you and move on, right? But when you can take the moment to let it land in the space, do your ground, uplift, remember trust, it can really change the game.
No, I can totally appreciate that. Oddly enough, I think, I also do theater on the side as a side hobby. And there's this concept of notes that you get afterwards. And in acting, you can be quite vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a moment of extreme vulnerability. And sometimes notes can be very harsh. And it can be very easy to take that personally and to feel that that's an attack on you as a person and as a professional. So I can totally appreciate what you're saying about it gives it a moment to land and not be reactive, be something you can contemplate and truly appreciate what it means, both constructively and not necessarily so constructively. Well, I
That's
can
right.
completely appreciate what you're saying there. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Matt, I'm curious as I walk through these steps, how does this land for you and, whatever stressful moments you've had?
It's very relevant. I'm having a stressful moment now because my yard guy just showed up early, and I don't know if you could hear the background noise or not.
Just
A
it's
little
like
bit. Yeah.
teeny, but it sounds more like a fan. It's not bad.
Okay, great. But no, it resonates a whole lot. I mean, a lot of it reminded me of Tai Chi, right? And energy flow and things like that, just through your body. etc. So these are all things that definitely resonate. This has been a great session. I just, for the sake of time, I do want to make sure that we can kind of wrap it up here. And I do think maybe a follow-on session where we're just doing this would be a great exercise. I think it has a ton of value, and I think it's something that's really neglected in the enterprise sales and just world as a whole. Despite all the free yoga classes and massage that you get that you used to get right at your
Well, but
company.
to your point, though, those are moments where I can take a break. Yes, it can help me lower the cumulative adrenaline cortisol that's in my body. What it doesn't do is it doesn't actually help position me in the moment to show up skillfully. And that's really the value of recognizing that we become what we practice, right? We've practiced that reactive response our whole lives. We're really good at it. We're super efficient at it. It's not so effective. Kevin's got some muscle memory that says, oh, when this happens, I'm going to take long, deep breaths. That's fantastic. And that's what you want to do is you want to take this other stuff and start integrating it into your day, because then under pressure, you have access to it. And because your brain will not remember, but your body will.
Yeah. And I know that you've now taken this, kind of individualized practice, but now have developed a workshop or a program for whole teams of
Yeah.
people as well. Can you talk about that just very quickly, just about what that's like? And then we could also, provide some links and other things for people that want to find out more. But what can you say about that?
Yeah. No, my focus, I love working with one-on-one with people, and my focus is really working with large scale teams, because now you're changing the environment for everybody. Now, when the pressure-filled moment happens, they can all say, ooh, that thing was a big thing. Okay, put it in something heavy near you. Everybody holding the heavy thing. We're going to put it down now. So I do workshops around navigating sort of everyday stress, around really upgrading the feedback experience, because that's highly stressful for people. We also do programs around managing and leading through large-scale change, because that's really stressful for people. And there's also a program around presenting to any size audience. So there are techniques and practices, and the way that I've done this with large teams is we do a program with the leaders first. They start to adopt the practices, they learn. I start with actually a diagnostic to hear about what some of the key challenges are, so we can set a vision. We create an identity for them to be living into, to be resilient. Then we start doing the practices with leaders, and then we roll it out to the team. So it's all done in the context of large scale change. How do you make the behavior change happen? With my largest client, the survey says 94% of the leaders are using the practices regularly. The rollout we just did with the whole big team, it was mid-90s for it was relevant, it was valuable, it was engaging, we want more. So people are really appreciative that they can take their stress and turn it into a strength.
Okay. I can't begin to express just how spot on I find this stuff, because I've watched so many salespeople get spun around the axle and talk themselves into a state where they can't be effective. They can't think clearly. They can't plan clearly. They can't act clear with any kind of rationality to where they're going. I think what you're talking about doing here is so important for people, because too many, you see them just overwhelmed, and you can see what the overall impact of that is. Kimberly, if someone wanted to start following you and start learning a little bit more about the services you offer and about this space in general, because of just how beneficial it can be to sellers, what would be a good way for them to either get in touch with you or to find out about other resources?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post there, usually 4 to 5 times a week. So you can find Kimberly S. Arnold on LinkedIn. I also have sample practices on my Somatic Leadership YouTube channel, and you can reach how to meet with me and all kinds of things through Linktree. So I'll give you all the links for those places.
And we'll put them all in the description, the diddly-do, as they like to call it, for the episode. But as Matt said, it's unfortunate, but we do need to bring this particular episode to a close. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on, Kimberly. It was so great to talk to you. It's always wonderful. I do follow you on LinkedIn. As you know, you see me in there lurking on your channel all the time. But it was wonderful for you to come on board. And I know Matt feels the same. But ladies and gentlemen,
I could actually top now.
Okay.
Yeah, but not too stressed about it. It's all good. We try to keep this casual and light and informative. So, but yes, he did turn off the lawnmower that was right outside my window a few seconds ago. Um, but anyway, Kimberly, it's been a pleasure as always. I look forward to maybe doing a follow-up session with you as well. This has been a great conversation, something I think is definitely lacking, this sort of dialogue, but I think really incredibly important as we're all trying to learn how to take care of ourselves and just have a more balanced approach to everything in our life. So thanks again. And for those listeners, please continue to like, subscribe, and follow our channel. If you have comments about what you've heard or other things you'd like to hear, please reach out. We do listen to them. But for now, thanks so much and have a great week.